Have you ever been told you don't belong, even when you've earned every right to be there? Imagine standing in the pouring rain outside a place you own, watching others pass freely while every ounce of your dignity feels questioned. This is exactly what happened to Adrian Bennett, a black CEO who had built an aviation empire from the ground up, only to be confronted by bias and disbelief in the most personal and public way. In that moment, Adrian had a choice: react in anger, or stay calm and measured, letting decades of experience and resilience guide him. Can you picture yourself in his shoes, drenched, humiliated, and facing the decision of whether to fight back or silently endure? What would you do if the world judged you before knowing your story? This isn't just a story about power or wealth. It's about courage, integrity, and standing firm in the face of injustice. It asks us all to reflect when confronted with bias or exclusion. Will we choose silence or action? Join us as we step into the storm with Adrian Bennett, witnessing how one decisive moment reshaped a company, empowered employees, and sparked a movement of dignity, equity, and justice. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to follow this unforgettable story of resilience and transformation. Rain poured relentlessly over the sprawling tarmac of Carter Metropolitan Airport. Each drop pounded the asphalt like a drumbeat announcing a storm, not just of weather, but of injustice about to unfold. The wind tugged at Adrian Bennett's tailored navy suit, plastering it to his chest. His polished Oxford shoes were soaked, the leather darkened and slick with rainwater. He took a measured step toward the VIP lounge entrance, holding a passport and boarding pass for the Falcon 8X his company owned. In any other moment, this would have been routine. Today, it felt like stepping into a gauntlet. "Sir, step aside. People like you don't fly on this jet," barked Victor Langston, the lounge manager, his voice sharp and deliberate. He didn't look like a man delivering routine instructions. He looked like a man asserting the authority he didn't truly possess. Adrian paused, jaw tight, eyes steady, absorbing the words like stones thrown against his dignity. Each syllable was heavy, not merely an insult, but a declaration that he didn't belong. Here, now, in the place he had built with years of vision and toil. Behind Victor, Monica Fields, head flight attendant, crossed her arms, smirk twisting her face. Her eyes, dark and narrow, scanned Adrian as if evaluating him not as a human being or a paying passenger, but as someone to be dismissed, humiliated, and rendered invisible. Layla Ortiz, the young ramp attendant, leaned against the doorway, her hands clutching a clipboard. She had seen injustice before. She had seen men like Adrian, powerful and accomplished, reduced to shadows in front of gate agents, managers, and flight attendants who thrived on the small power their uniforms granted them. Fear rooted her to the spot, but her chest ached as she watched. She wanted to step forward, to defend what was right, but fear whispered too loudly. Fear of lost paychecks, of reprimand, of career derailment. Darius Cole, a ground supervisor, lingered near the edge of the tarmac. His years in the industry had taught him that speaking out rarely resulted in justice for anyone but himself. Yet even as his hands fidgeted, he couldn't tear his gaze away from Adrian. Standing tall in the rain, a figure of quiet authority humbling those who sought to mock him. Victor's tone sharpened, suspicion dripping like venom as he reached for Adrian's boarding pass. He examined it under the harsh lighting of the lounge entrance, turning it, flipping it, scrutinizing every edge. "These don't look right. Step outside while I check," he snapped. It wasn't procedure. It wasn't verification. It was punishment. Adrian complied, not because he accepted the indignity, but because he had learned a lesson decades ago. Sometimes silence held more power than protest. He stepped onto the rain-slicked tarmac, water seeping into his shoes, soaking through his socks. His face betrayed nothing, yet inside, a storm raged. Memories of childhood humiliation, of being chased out of stores, accused of theft he hadn't committed, of subtle dismissals that piled like bricks in his chest over the years. The echoes of prejudice were familiar, yet they fueled a resolve deeper than anger. Nearby, Miles Carter, a ground technician, pretended to inspect his equipment. Secretly, his phone was recording every sneer, every deliberate pause, every slight twist of Victor's mouth, every mocking glance from Monica, every hesitant glance from Cassandra Reed. The HR regional manager. Miles captured it all. He knew the value of evidence. He knew that even the smallest camera could turn injustice into accountability. Adrian's eyes swept the tarmac, landing on the sleek lines of his Falcon 8X parked a few dozen feet away, gleaming silver under the storm-lit sky. This plane, a symbol of the empire he had built, now seemed to witness the insult unfolding. The rain clung to his suit, his tie flattened against his chest, and still, he stood unmoved. His patience was not weakness. It was a quiet weapon, a way to make the impending reckoning all the more devastating. Monica Fields finally spoke aloud, her voice slicing through the rhythm of the rain. "You don't look like someone who could afford a seat in 1A. Her words were deliberate, designed to wound, to humiliate not just the CEO in front of her, but the idea of every black professional who dared to claim space in a world that often denied it. Layla's hands trembled slightly as tears welled in her eyes. Darius Cole's shoulders sagged under the weight of shame and regret. Miles's camera never wavered. He knew that this was a moment that mattered, a pivot upon which truth could swing. Victor stepped closer, his arrogance a shield against any recognition of wrongdoing. "This isn't your place. Head back to the commercial terminal," he ordered, each word a stone, meant to weigh Adrian down. But Adrian's heart did not falter. He had faced storms far more ruthless than this, storms that had tested his resolve and built the steel of his character. He thought of the boy he had been, walking home from school in Chicago, shoulders slumped under the sting of words and glances that said he didn't belong. That boy had survived. That boy had vowed never again to let anyone define his worth. That boy lived in the man standing in the rain now, eyes steady, shoulders squared, mind focused. Layla wanted to move, to intervene, to speak, but fear rooted her to the spot. Darius, too, felt the tug of conscience and terror intertwined. Miles continued recording, each frame a silent testament to injustice. Adrian's breath fogged in the cold air, but he didn't shiver. He didn't flinch. He knew the storm outside was nothing compared to the storm he was about to summon, and in that stillness, he prepared for the first move that would begin a reckoning no one could ignore. The rain fell harder, each droplet a punctuation on the tension. Each second stretched into eternity. Adrian Bennett, CEO, empire builder, son of Chicago, stood silent but unbroken, ready to reclaim his dignity and command the truth from those who thought they had power over him. Adrian Bennett stood under the relentless rain, droplets cascading down his face, soaking his hair and dripping from the collar of his navy suit. His eyes, dark and steady, scanned the tarmac as if measuring every angle, every shadow, every potential threat. Around him, the storm swirled in chaotic symphony, yet within him, A different storm raged, one forged not by clouds and wind, but by memories, resilience, and the sharp sting of being underestimated. He thought of the boy he had been, 12 years old, walking home through the streets of Chicago's South Side after a store clerk accused him of stealing candy he had only touched briefly. His mother's hand had tightened around his wrist, pulling him along, whispering reassurance against the sting of humiliation. He had felt small, powerless, invisible. Yet in that moment of unjust accusation, he had made a silent vow he would never allow someone else to define his worth. He had carried that vow through every boardroom, every negotiation, every flight across oceans. And now, standing soaked on his own tarmac, that boy's memory fueled the man he had become. Adrian's breath came in slow, deliberate puffs, mixing with the mist rising from the wet asphalt. His pulse was calm, almost deceptively so, but each beat resonated with a quiet intensity. This was not a moment for rash action, nor for visible anger. It was a moment for precision. Every word, every movement, every choice would have weight. The storm around him mirrored the tension between restraint and retribution inside him. He had been humiliated, yes, but he had learned that patience, when wielded strategically, could be more powerful than outbursts of rage. Layla Ortiz, still clinging to the doorway of the lounge, glanced at Adrian. Her own heart tightened as she watched the CEO remain silent, drenched, yet commanding the space with an invisible authority. She thought of her parents, immigrants who had fought tooth and nail for every opportunity, often overlooked for the slightest difference in accent or skin tone. She had seen them bend under the weight of systemic obstacles and had vowed to honor their struggle, but fear kept her rooted, her hands clutching the clipboard as if it were a shield. She wanted to speak, to intervene, yet she remained silent, caught between conscience and apprehension. Darius Cole, the ground supervisor, stood slightly apart, the rain plastering his jacket to his frame. He had seen injustice countless times, often looking the other way to protect his position, his livelihood. Yet something about Adrian's stance, the calm authority, the way he absorbed insult without losing composure stirred something in him. Guilt mingled with admiration. He thought of the moments he had stayed silent, allowing minor indignities to pass without challenge. Each lapse in courage had weighed on him. But here, at this moment, he could feel the possibility of redemption whispering through the storm. Miles Carter, crouched slightly behind a maintenance cart, adjusted his phone discreetly. The camera lens captured the tense tableau, Victor Langston's smirk, Monica Field's sharp gaze. Cassandra Reed typing slowly on her tablet with calculated delay, and Adrian Bennett standing, unflinching, a figure of unspoken power. Miles knew he was recording history in motion. Every angle, every frame could be used to expose the prejudice and arrogance that had dared to humiliate a man of Adrian's stature. Miles felt a thrill of anticipation mingled with anxiety. This moment, he understood, could change everything. Victor Langston's voice cut through the drizzle. "You don't look like someone who belongs here. Step aside while we verify this." He spat, examining Adrian's boarding pass with exaggerated scrutiny. There was a subtle venom in his tone, a mix of insecurity and contempt. Adrian met his gaze, unmoved, allowing the manager's hostility to hang in the air. He could have snapped, could have demanded recognition, could have unleashed a torrent of words to shame Victor in return. Yet he chose silence, knowing that the storm of confrontation would come at precisely the right moment. Monica Fields leaned forward, her expression a blend of suspicion and thinly veiled derision. "This is a private jet. she said, her voice icy, echoing across the tarmac. "You clearly don't belong here." She gestured toward the sleek Falcon 8X parked just beyond the wet concrete. Every syllable was designed to wound, to diminish, to assert dominance over a man who had built the very company that employed her. Adrian did not flinch. His mind, however, traced the arc of every slight, every misstep, every microaggression that had brought him here. He catalogued them silently, each one a reminder that he was not powerless, only strategically patient. Cassandra Reed, the HR regional manager, typed slowly on her tablet, glancing occasionally at Adrian, then back at Victor and Monica. She knew the truth. Adrian's credentials were flawless, his identity undeniable. Yet she delayed, hesitant. Her actions motivated not by protocol, but by self-preservation. Every keystroke was a small betrayal, an attempt to maintain her fragile standing in a system she feared might turn on her. In the pit of her stomach, a flicker of doubt stirred. What if this man, so calm and assured, chose to expose the deception and prejudice she had quietly sanctioned? Adrian's gaze swept the small cluster of witnesses and participants. Layla, Darius, and Miles all caught in varying degrees of complicity, fear, or silent observation. He acknowledged their presence, though subtly, like a general assessing the battlefield. He did not need their immediate intervention. Their roles would unfold in time. His focus remained on the challenge before him, reclaiming authority over the moment, turning humiliation into leverage, transforming the storm into a stage for accountability. Memories of childhood humiliation interlaced with decades of corporate negotiation and strategic thinking. Each slight, each underestimated move, each dismissive glance he had endured built a mental ledger. This was not merely a test of patience. It was an orchestration of power. Adrian allowed the rain to soak through, allowed the cold to bite, all the while mentally preparing the sequence of actions that would eventually invert the dynamics entirely. He did not speak, yet his presence filled the space with unspoken command. The minutes stretched on, each second heavy with anticipation. Victor's smirk faltered slightly. Monica's gaze flickered with doubt. Cassandra's fingers hesitated over the keyboard. Even Layla's breath caught involuntarily as the tension coiled tighter, wound around Adrian like a spring ready to release. In this stillness, Adrian's internal storm memory, strategy, patience, and resolve was about to converge into action. He thought of every boardroom where he had been underestimated, every investor who had doubted him, every colleague who had questioned his ability based on nothing more than the color of his skin. The cumulative weight of all those moments was not crushing. It was empowering. He had learned to convert humiliation into insight, anger into action, patience into leverage. And now, standing alone in the rain, he prepared to convert this public insult into a reckoning that would be witnessed, remembered, and recorded. A light flickered in the distance, the Falcon 8X gleaming faintly under the storm clouds. It was both a literal and symbolic target, the aircraft he owned, the seat he had purchased, the empire he had built. And yet, for all its prestige, it was momentarily irrelevant compared to the assertion of dignity he intended to claim. Adrian shifted his stance slightly, ensuring every observer, Victor, Monica, Cassandra, Layla, Darius. Miles perceived him fully. He would not speak yet. The storm outside was mirrored by a storm inside him, coiled and ready. Silence reigned on the tarmac, broken only by the drum of rain on asphalt and the distant rumble of engines. Adrian Bennett, soaked, unbowed, and profoundly composed, stood as a sentinel of quiet authority. In the eyes of those around him, he was a man awaiting recognition. In his own mind, he was a conductor orchestrating the first notes of a reckoning that would ripple far beyond this rain-soaked tarmac. Victor Langston straightened his blazer, the fabric clinging to his back from the rain, his jaw tight with a mixture of arrogance and fear. His smirk had faded slightly as he observed Adrian Bennett standing silently on the tarmac, the CEO's presence radiating a quiet power that made Victor's confidence tremble. He had done this countless times before, blocking, questioning, humiliating, but never had the man in front of him exuded such authority without uttering a single word. This was new, uncomfortable, and it made Victor wary. Monica Fields, head flight attendant, stepped closer to Victor, her heels clicking against the wet pavement. She crossed her arms, her smirk returning, yet her eyes flickered with doubt. "He doesn't even flinch," she whispered, loud enough for Victor to hear. "It's like he knows something we don't." She scanned Adrian from head to toe, searching for a sign of weakness, for any hint that he could be intimidated. Finding none, a shadow of uncertainty crossed her face. Cassandra Reed sat slightly apart, typing deliberately on her tablet, her fingers moving slowly over the screen. Every keystroke was measured, every glance at Adrian calculated. She knew his credentials were indisputable. She knew who he was, yet she had chosen to delay verification, knowing that in doing so, she protected her own fragile position. The past few years had taught her that protecting herself sometimes required bending the rules, remaining silent, and letting others take the heat. Now, confronted by the man she had underestimated, that choice weighed heavily on her conscience. Layla Ortiz watched from the side, her chest tightening as she felt the tension radiating from the trio. Fear rooted her to the spot, but empathy surged within her. She could see the unfairness, the bias, the calculated humiliation, and her own hesitation gnawed at her. She wanted to step forward, to tell the truth, but the consequences loomed in her mind: reprimand, lost hours, possibly her job. She clenched her hands around the clipboard, willing herself to stay silent but hoping for some unseen intervention. Darius Cole, standing just behind Layla, felt the weight of every decision he had made in his career press against him. Years of watching injustice, of turning a blind eye, now coiled around him like a constricting rope. He longed to step forward, to speak, yet fear stayed his words. Fear of losing his livelihood, of being targeted, of failing to protect his family. And yet the sight of Adrian, drenched but unwavering, struck a chord within him, a reminder that courage, though difficult, was possible. Victor's voice cut through the rain. "Step aside," he commanded, extending his hand toward Adrian's boarding pass. He examined it under the harsh light, flipping it back and forth. "This doesn't look right," he said, a subtle sneer in his tone. Each word was designed to assert dominance, to reinforce a hierarchy based not on merit, but on prejudice. Victor had convinced himself that keeping Adrian outside was an act of control, a small victory in a system that had long intimidated men like him. Yet now, faced with Adrian's unshakable composure, doubt began to creep into Victor's mind. Monica Fields, sensing the tension, raised her voice slightly, carrying it, so all the ground crew could hear. "This is a private jet," she declared, gesturing toward the Falcon 8X gleaming under the storm-lit sky. "You don't belong here." Her words were calculated, meant to humiliate, meant to establish that Adrian's authority did not extend to this space. Yet her eyes betrayed a flicker of fear, an acknowledgement that the silent storm in front of her was more powerful than she had anticipated. Cassandra Reed, ever calculating, kept typing. Her fingers moved slowly, deliberately, as though she could delay the truth into insignificance. She whispered to Victor, "Keep him waiting. Don't let him inside just yet." Her voice carried just enough authority to guide the others, yet not enough to expose her complicity to Adrian. Every word was a gamble. Every pause was a test of control. She had convinced herself that her loyalty lay with procedure, but deep down, she knew this was about protecting herself, not the company. Layla Ortiz's breath caught as she watched. She felt a tug of war inside her, between fear and morality. The young ramp attendant wanted to step forward, to correct the injustice unfolding, yet the risk anchored her to the spot. She thought of her parents, of the struggles they endured as immigrants, of opportunities denied because of skin, accent, or origin, and she realized, painfully, that her hesitation mirrored the systemic silence that had allowed so many injustices to persist. She looked at Adrian and felt a swell of admiration. In his stillness, he carried not just his own dignity, but a reminder of what was possible when one stood firm. Darius Cole, too, felt a tightening in his chest. He had been complicit, albeit passively, in the microaggressions and systemic biases of the past. Watching Adrian, he realized the weight of inaction, the subtle cost of staying silent. Each moment he hesitated, he added to a history of compliance with injustice, and yet he also felt the faint spark of potential redemption, the chance to act, to support, to witness courage, and learn from it. Victor glanced around, trying to gather his confidence. "We have procedures to follow," he said. "You understand that." "Right." His voice betrayed an edge of desperation now, a recognition that his earlier arrogance might be insufficient to control this scenario. He looked at Monica and Cassandra for support, seeking solidarity. Yet all three were under the quiet gravity of Adrian Bennett's presence, a force they could neither ignore nor intimidate. Monica Fields, sensing a crack in Victor's confidence, maintained her posture but allowed herself a brief glance at the ground crew. Her smirk faltered. She had counted on Adrian reacting with visible anger, on the humiliation eliciting a defensive response. Instead, he stood, composed, deliberate, radiating authority without words. The miscalculation unsettled her, and for the first time, she felt fear mixed with the irritation of power slipping from her control. Cassandra Reed paused mid-typing, realizing the same thing. Her attempts to manipulate the system, to create delay, to maintain control, were no longer sufficient. The silence emanating from Adrian carried weight, a quiet assertion that this storm would not pass unnoticed. She swallowed hard, the inkling of fear creeping into her chest. For once, procedure alone would not protect her from accountability. Miles Carter, crouched slightly behind a maintenance cart, continued recording. Every subtle twitch, every hesitant glance, every whispered instruction, every sneer and smirk, he captured it all. He understood the significance. This recording would become more than evidence. It would become a mirror reflecting the complicity and misjudgment of those who thought they held power. And he felt a growing sense of purpose, a responsibility to ensure the truth would be revealed. The rain continued to hammer the tarmac, relentless, echoing the tension of the human storm surrounding Adrian Bennett. Each droplet seemed to amplify the silence, highlighting the disparity between those wielding authority without conscience and the one man standing as the embodiment of patient, strategic power. In the stillness, the imbalance of control became palpable. Victor, Monica, Cassandra, each of them complicit, each now aware that the equilibrium was shifting. Adrian's composure had already begun to command the narrative, shaping the unfolding moment before a single word had been spoken. The rain was relentless, hammering against the tarmac, bouncing off the sleek fuselage of the Falcon 8X with a rhythm that seemed to echo the tension building on the asphalt. Adrian Bennett's navy suit clung to his chest, soaked and heavy, yet he moved with deliberate calm, his eyes sweeping the scene as if nothing could disturb him. But beneath that calm exterior, a storm of memories and strategic calculation churned fiercely. Each raindrop seemed to echo past indignities, each flash of lightning a reminder of battles won silently, yet decisively. Victor Langston's voice cut through the steady drum of the rain. "Step aside. You don't belong here until we verify this." He extended his hand for Adrian's boarding pass, examining it again under the tarmac lights. Each flick of his wrist, each sharp glance was deliberate, designed to assert dominance, to reassert his control over the space. Victor thrived on the illusion of power, yet the certainty in Adrian's eyes gnawed at him. The manager's smirk faltered slightly, an uncharacteristic twitch of doubt. Monica Fields leaned forward, her heels sinking slightly into the wet pavement. She crossed her arms, her nails tapping impatiently. "This is private," she said, her voice loud enough to carry across the tarmac. "You clearly don't belong." Every word was chosen to wound, to challenge Adrian, to provoke a reaction that would confirm their perceived superiority. She expected anger, tension, or at least visible frustration. What she did not anticipate was Adrian's quiet strength, a stillness that made her feel off balance, uncertain, as if the very air around him demanded recognition. Cassandra Reed's fingers hovered above her tablet, hesitating mid-keystroke. She knew the truth. Adrian's credentials were flawless, but the choice she had made to delay verification now felt fragile, exposed under the weight of his presence. Fear crept into her mind. What if he exposed her complicity? What if this silent, rain-soaked figure turned the tables entirely? Her carefully constructed facade of control threatened to crumble. Layla Ortiz's chest ached as she observed. She wanted to intervene, to speak up, yet the risk of retaliation rooted her in place. Her parents' struggles in a country that often judged them by accent or skin reminded her why she had stayed quiet in the past. Now, watching Adrian unmoved, she felt admiration and a sharp pang of guilt. Each passing moment reminded her that her inaction was complicit in the injustice unfolding before her eyes. Darius Cole's heart raced. He had spent decades navigating a system that rewarded compliance and punished dissent. And here, under the pounding rain, he felt the weight of every instance he had stayed silent. Watching Adrian, he realized the power of integrity, the force of standing firm. He clenched his fists against the chill and tension, preparing himself for a choice to continue hiding or to align with justice. Miles Carter crouched behind a maintenance cart, phone in hand, recording every micro-expression, every hesitation, every whispered instruction from the trio of antagonists. Victor's sharp jawline, Monica's narrowed eyes, Cassandra's subtle movements, they all told a story of arrogance, fear, and misjudgment. Miles knew that this footage would not just document an incident, it would expose the truth, turn a private act of prejudice into a public reckoning. Victor stepped closer, leaning into Adrian's space with an air of authority. "You need to wait outside. Until we verify this, you're not boarding." His voice, though forceful, contained an undercurrent of insecurity now. Adrian's eyes met his, steady and unflinching, and in that gaze, Victor felt a quiet force he could neither mock nor control. The small victories he had counted on slipped through his fingers like water in the rain. Monica Fields, sensing Victor's faltering confidence, raised her voice even higher, projecting it across the tarmac. "We know who belongs here, and it's not you. This is private." She gestured at Adrian as if physically pushing him back with words, yet her outward aggression masked a subtle panic. She had anticipated a fight, an outburst, or at least visible indignation. Adrian's calm presence undermined her sense of control, leaving her off balance and increasingly aware of the stakes she had misjudged. Cassandra Reed, typing slowly but deliberately, leaned toward Victor, whispering, "Just keep him waiting. Don't let him inside yet. He can't get in." Her words were intended to reinforce their collective authority, yet they were laced with hesitation, revealing cracks in her confidence. She knew Adrian could expose her in an instant, and every fiber of her self-interest screamed that delay alone would not suffice. Layla felt her heart pound in her chest. Every instinct screamed to speak, yet fear anchored her tongue. She wanted to call out the injustice, to defend Adrian, to break the silence, but the risk of consequences weighed heavily. Each drop of rain that soaked her uniform mirrored the tension in her chest, a physical reminder of the moral dilemma she faced. Watching Adrian remain composed, she drew a quiet inspiration. Courage often began with observation, with a choice to act at the right moment. Darius Cole shifted uncomfortably. He recognized the pattern of abuse and complicity, the ways that fear had dictated behavior for years. And yet, seeing Adrian's unwavering stance, the dignity he radiated despite public humiliation, he felt an awakening. He felt the weight of responsibility pressing upon him, an opportunity to do what he had avoided for so long. He realized that silence, while safe, carried its own cost. Miles Carter's camera continued to capture every moment. The footage told a story beyond words: arrogance, insecurity, hesitation, and a quiet, unyielding strength. It would serve as undeniable evidence when the reckoning came. And Miles felt a growing sense of purpose. This was not just documentation, it was preparation for justice. The tarmac, drenched and glistening under storm-lit skies, seemed to hold its breath. The tension was palpable. Adrian's quiet patience and resolute demeanor created a gravitational pull that unsettled the trio of antagonists. Every second of silence amplified their discomfort, making Victor, Monica, and Cassandra increasingly aware that their assumptions about control, authority, and power were no longer valid. Adrian's thoughts wandered to the countless times he had been underestimated, disrespected, or dismissed solely because of the color of his skin. Those memories were no longer sources of anger. They were instruments of strategy. The lessons learned from decades of navigating prejudice were now poised to orchestrate a response that would leave no doubt about who commanded the narrative. The storm outside mirrored the storm within him, a carefully coiled tension, ready to convert humiliation into leverage. The minutes stretched, each passing second building a quiet crescendo. Victor's smirk faltered further. Monica's gaze darted nervously, and Cassandra's fingers hovered indecisively over the tablet. Even Layla and Darius felt the weight of inevitability approaching. And Miles continued recording, knowing that the moment of truth was imminent. Adrian Bennett stood unmoved, unbowed, and profoundly composed, ready to transform the silent storm into action that would ripple far beyond this rain-soaked tarmac. Adrian Bennett's phone buzzed in his pocket, vibrating softly against his chest as the rain plastered his suit tighter. He glanced at it, noting the familiar number of his assistant and COO, Sierra Bennett, who managed the company's legal and operational affairs with the same precision and calm he prized. He stepped slightly closer to the Falcon 8X, the storm surrounding him like a curtain, and pressed the phone to his ear. "Sierra," he said, his voice calm but resonant, carrying across the storm. "Send the convoy. Bring the executive team, the legal counsel, security, and HR oversight. We're handling a crisis at Carter Metropolitan Airport. Immediately." His words were deliberate, each syllable weighed with authority. There was no panic, no anger, only the quiet precision of a man who had endured humiliation and now intended to convert it into decisive action. On the other end, Sierra's voice was steady but urgent. "Understood. Adrian, they'll be en route within 5 minutes. Do you want me to coordinate with local law enforcement as well?" "Not yet," Adrian replied. "Let them arrive to witness the sequence. We want this documented, observed, and undeniable." His gaze swept over the tarmac, landing on Victor Langston, Monica Fields, and Cassandra Reed. Each of them was still poised, still attempting to assert control, still unaware of the storm about to descend upon them, both literal and metaphorical. Victor noticed the subtle shift first, the slight click of Adrian's phone signaling communication, and a flicker of uncertainty crossed his face. Monica stiffened, her eyes narrowing as she realized Adrian was no ordinary passenger. Cassandra Reed's fingers froze mid-keystroke, the magnitude of the unfolding moment pressing down on her. All three sensed, instinctively, that control was slipping from their grasp. Layla Ortiz held her breath. The quiet authority emanating from Adrian made her chest tighten. She had seen managers exert dominance, humiliate, and control. Yet she had never seen someone dismantle that authority with composure alone. Darius Cole, standing behind her, clenched his fists, feeling a mixture of anticipation and dread. The moments of silence had built tension like a drawn bowstring, and now the first tremor of change reverberated across the tarmac. Miles Carter continued recording, every subtle shift, every whispered instruction, every falter in the antagonist's posture captured in real time. The footage would be decisive, a chronicle of arrogance meeting calculated authority. He felt the weight of responsibility pressing on him. The recording was no longer just an observation. It was the evidence of the truth that would soon reshape the narrative. Victor Langston, sensing the phone call, straightened his back, forcing a smirk onto his face. "Calling someone won't change anything," he muttered, half to himself, half to Monica. "We control this space. We've always controlled it." His voice trembled slightly, betraying his growing unease. He glanced at Cassandra Reed, seeking reassurance, but found only mirrored uncertainty. The three antagonists were beginning to realize that the balance of power had shifted in ways they could not yet quantify. Monica Fields, heels, slipping slightly on the wet tarmac, tried to maintain her composure. "We're following procedure," she said, loud enough for the ground crew to hear, her tone a mixture of defiance and nervousness. Yet even as she spoke, her eyes flicked toward Adrian. He remained unmoved, silent, drenched, yet undeniably commanding the space. The defiance in her voice felt hollow, a brittle shield against the calm force confronting her. Cassandra Reed's whisper to Victor came, hesitant and thin. "Keep him waiting." "He can't." Her words faltered as her internal conflict surged. She knew that the system could no longer protect her. Adrian's presence, the coming convoy, and the evidence being recorded ensured that her delay and complicity would be exposed. She swallowed hard, realizing that the stakes had risen beyond mere procedural games. Layla felt a spark of courage ignite. Watching Adrian, she understood that silence was no longer sufficient. She felt the pull to act, to align with integrity rather than fear. Yet her feet remained planted. Her mind raced. One small act could tip the balance, could signal the beginning of accountability. Darius Cole experienced a similar stir of realization. Years of passive compliance collided with the clarity of the moment. The storm was not only above them, it was inside, demanding a choice. Adrian's thoughts, however, remained sharp and methodical. He reflected on the decades spent navigating prejudice, the childhood memories of being underestimated and dismissed, the boardroom confrontations, and the countless times authority had been misjudged. This moment was no different, except now he held both visibility and leverage. The patience he had cultivated would now serve as a springboard into action. Suddenly, headlights pierced the rain. Black SUVs screamed onto the tarmac, their tires sending water flying, forming a visual barrier that separated the trio of antagonists from the approaching reinforcements. Sirens blared, slicing through the storm and amplifying the tension. Victor stepped back instinctively. Monica's breath caught, and Cassandra's face paled. The arrival of Adrian's executive convoy transformed the tarmac from a scene of intimidation into a stage set for accountability. From the lead vehicle, Sierra Bennett stepped out, flanked by legal counsel, security, and senior HR executives. Her presence radiated competence and unwavering support. She locked eyes with Adrian and nodded subtly. This was the confirmation he needed. The tide had begun to turn. Each member of the approaching team was a symbol of authority, law, and procedure converging with strategic patience. Victor Langston's smirk faltered completely, replaced by a twitch of panic. Monica Fields gritted her teeth, and Cassandra Reed stared, her carefully maintained composure unraveling. The once unquestioned hierarchy of the lounge now stood exposed to scrutiny. Adrian remained still, phone still in hand, eyes calm, yet every muscle tuned to action. He did not need to shout. The storm, the convoy, and the impending confrontation carried the weight of inevitability. Layla Ortiz and Darius Cole exhaled subtly, feeling the first stirrings of relief and anticipation. Miles Carter's camera continued to record, each frame capturing the vulnerability of arrogance exposed and the silent potency of calculated resolve. The tension on the tarmac, heavy and electric, was about to break. The twist, the undeniable revelation that Adrian Bennett's authority, integrity, and foresight far surpassed the petty arrogance of those attempting to humiliate him, was imminent in that charged moment. Adrian lifted his hand slightly, a subtle signal to his team. The storm seemed to pause, the rain falling like scattered applause, as if the sky itself acknowledged the gravity of the coming reckoning. Victor, Monica, and Cassandra were still trying to cling to perceived control, but the balance had shifted irreversibly. The stage was set for confrontation, accountability, and the first wave of justice, and everyone on the tarmac sensed it. The roar of engines from the approaching convoy blended with the thunder overhead, creating a tense symphony across the rain-slicked tarmac. Adrian Bennett stepped forward, phone still in hand, signaling to his team subtly. He didn't need to shout. The storm, the approaching SUVs, and the weight of his presence spoke louder than words. Victor Langston, Monica Fields, and Cassandra Reed felt the shift immediately. The illusion of control they had maintained was dissolving. Victor's eyes narrowed. "You called for backup," he sneered, though the edge in his voice betrayed fear. "We can handle this ourselves." His words were intended to assert dominance, yet they fell flat under Adrian's unyielding gaze. The man before him was not just any passenger. He was the CEO of the very company whose private jet they were guarding, a man whose authority Victor had underestimated at his peril. Monica Fields shifted her stance, heels sinking slightly into the wet pavement. "He's bluffing," she muttered, trying to regain control. Yet her voice wavered as the convoy drew closer, headlights cutting through sheets of rain. Every officer, attorney, and executive stepping out of the SUVs was a living symbol of accountability. The balance had tipped. Their arrogance was now exposed. Cassandra Reed's fingers froze mid-keystroke. Her tablet, once a shield of false control, felt heavy in her hands. She knew that delay and deception had been her tools, her protection, but standing before Adrian and his team, they were useless. The subtle tremor in her hands betrayed the internal panic she could no longer mask. The rain soaked her hair and jacket, yet she couldn't find comfort in the storm. It only mirrored her unraveling composure. Adrian's gaze swept over the trio, calm but unyielding. He allowed a pause, letting the tension saturate the air. Every second of silence was strategic, a reminder that the power of patience and integrity could be more formidable than anger. Then, with deliberate precision, he extended his phone toward the trio. "Your actions have been recorded," he said evenly, "and the documentation is already in the hands of my executive team. You were given an opportunity to act fairly. You chose otherwise." Victor's jaw clenched. "We were following procedure," he barked, though the defensiveness rang hollow. Adrian's eyes, steady and unwavering, met his. "Procedure," Adrian said. "You waved through a white passenger without verification. Your procedure was selective, biased, and intended to humiliate me. Explain yourselves." The words cut through the storm louder than thunder, carrying the weight of authority honed over decades. The tarmac seemed to hold its breath. Monica Fields swallowed hard. She had expected confrontation. Yes, but not this. She had anticipated anger, perhaps shouting, yet Adrian's calm presence and methodical accusation disarmed her. She searched for words, for any excuse, but the weight of his silence and evidence left her stranded. The storm above mirrored the storm inside her, chaotic, relentless, impossible to ignore. Cassandra Reed's tablet slipped slightly in her hands. Her carefully maintained composure was faltering. She had delayed verification, whispered to Victor and Monica to push Adrian aside, and tried to protect herself under the guise of procedure. Now, confronted by both Adrian and the imminent arrival of his executive convoy, the web of her complicity was unraveling. It must be a system error," she stammered, weakly. Her voice carried no conviction. It was a feeble attempt at self-preservation. Layla Ortiz and Darius Cole exchanged glances, silent witnesses to the unfolding reckoning. Layla felt a surge of determination. She had remained silent out of fear. Yet watching Adrian, she recognized the importance of alignment with integrity. Darius felt similarly. The decades of passive compliance weighed on him, but Adrian's composure inspired the courage that had been dormant. The tension pressed down on everyone present, yet it also illuminated the path toward action. Miles Carter, crouched behind a maintenance cart, continued filming. Every subtle twitch, hesitation, and whispered instruction was recorded. The footage now captured not just arrogance, but exposure, the unraveling of those who had attempted to wield power without merit. Miles felt the weight of this moment. The video would speak louder than any argument, proving the truth for anyone willing to see it. Adrian's gaze softened slightly as he looked at Layla and Darius. "I understand fear," he said, voice calm but piercing. "I understand the hesitation that comes from uncertainty. but remaining silent in the face of injustice enables it to persist. The choice to act is always available. Today, the opportunity is yours. His words were quiet, yet carried more weight than any shout. The storm seemed to pause for a heartbeat, honoring the gravity of his message. Victor Langston's voice quavered now, a mixture of anger and dread. "You're overstepping." "This isn't your jurisdiction," he snapped, but the words lacked the conviction they had once held. Adrian tilted his head slightly, observing him. "This is not overstepping," he said evenly. "This is accountability. A CEO has a responsibility to ensure his company's values are upheld. You failed, and now you must answer for it." Monica Fields tried to interject. Her words clipped and sharp. "We were only—" But Adrian raised a hand subtly, silencing her without breaking his composure. "Your intent is irrelevant when the outcome perpetuates bias and exclusion," he said. "The harm is done, and it is undeniable." His gaze swept over the assembled executives now stepping onto the tarmac, each a witness to the unfolding confrontation. Authority was no longer a matter of perception. It was fact, and it stood firmly on Adrian's side. Cassandra Reed's face drained of color. Her whispered justifications, the system error excuse, the deliberate delay, all were laid bare by Adrian's calm precision. The realization hit her the storm was no longer external. The storm was her accountability, immediate and unavoidable. There was no escape. Layla Ortiz finally found her voice. "He's right," she said quietly, stepping forward. "I saw what happened. They didn't follow proper procedures with him or with anyone else. It was wrong." Her declaration, though tentative, carried a quiet authority, amplified by Adrian's presence and the arrival of the convoy. Darius Cole nodded slightly, exhaling, adding weight to her statement. "It's true." I hesitated, but it was wrong to stay silent. Victor Langston's face contorted with disbelief and panic. Monica Fields' hands trembled slightly. Cassandra Reed looked ready to collapse under the weight of exposure. The balance of power had irrevocably shifted. Adrian Bennett, still calm, still strategic, had initiated the first decisive move. The storm above was loud, yet it paled in comparison to the storm of accountability now fully unleashed on the tarmac. Adrian Bennett stepped fully onto the tarmac, his shoes sinking slightly into the rain-soaked asphalt. The storm above mirrored the intensity of the moment. Yet Adrian remained composed, each movement deliberate. Victor Langston, Monica Fields, and Cassandra Reed could feel the shift in the air. What had begun as a routine check now escalated into an inescapable confrontation with authority, integrity, and accountability. Adrian's gaze first met Victor's, steady and piercing. "Victor Langston," he said evenly, his voice calm yet carrying an unmistakable weight. "You humiliated me on the tarmac of my own company. You forced me to wait in the rain, questioned my legitimacy, and displayed bias that has no place in this organization. Explain yourself." Victor's jaw tightened, a twitch of panic betraying his facade of control. "I was following procedure," he stammered, though the assertion sounded hollow against the relentless force of Adrian's presence. "We were protecting the company's interests." Adrian tilted his head slightly, not in anger, but in measured scrutiny. Protecting the company, he repeated, by discriminating against the CEO, by publicly humiliating him while letting others pass unchallenged. His words cut sharply through the noise of the storm, each syllable deliberate, exposing the contradictions in Victor's defense. Monica Fields shifted nervously, trying to interject, her voice raising as if volume could mask her internal unease. We We didn't know who he was. This is private." But even as she spoke, her confidence wavered. The presence of Adrian's executive convoy, the recording being captured by Miles Carter, and the weight of undeniable truth all chipped away at her attempts to maintain authority. Cassandra Reed's fingers trembled over her tablet. Her carefully constructed facade, built over years of self-preservation and selective inaction, now crumbled under the undeniable exposure of her choices. "It must have been a system error," she murmured, her voice weak and disjointed, as if mere repetition could salvage her credibility. Layla Ortiz's chest tightened, yet a spark of courage emerged. She stepped forward, rain dripping from her hair, voice firm though steady. "He's right," she said. "I saw what happened. They didn't follow proper procedures with him or with anyone else. It was wrong." Darius Cole, sensing the moment, nodded in agreement, adding weight to her statement. "I stayed silent out of fear," he admitted, "but that was a mistake." The three antagonists exchanged glances, realization dawning that their control had evaporated. The storm was not just above, it was a manifestation of the consequences now descending upon them. Adrian's composure amplified their fear. His calm presence exposed the fragility of their arrogance and complicity. Miles Carter, crouched behind a maintenance cart, kept the camera rolling. Every glance, every falter, every whispered justification was captured in perfect clarity. Victor's false confidence, Monica's brittle defiance, Cassandra's unraveling all of it would serve as irrefutable evidence when Adrian initiated the next steps. Adrian's gaze then swept over the crowd-gathered executives, legal counsel, security, and HR. He raised a hand slightly, and the storm of accountability seemed to coalesce into a tangible force. "This isn't about punishment for the sake of punishment," he said. "It's about justice, equity, and restoring the dignity of every individual within Carter Aviation. What happened here cannot be ignored. What you chose to do, or not do, has consequences." Victor swallowed hard, trying to form a response, but the words failed him. Monica's nails dug into her palms as she realized the gravity of the situation. Cassandra's face drained of color, the feeble excuses she had prepared slipping away, like water through her fingers. The storm outside was loud, yet the storm of exposure and accountability was louder within this circle of confrontation. Adrian's voice softened slightly, carrying both authority and resolve. "Layla? Darius? Miles, you saw this unfold. You now have a choice. Continue to be silent, or act in the service of integrity. The path is clear, and your conscience will guide you." Their eyes met his, and in that moment, courage took root. They knew that remaining passive was no longer acceptable. Victor finally found a semblance of defiance. "You can't just fire us out here," he snapped, though the force behind his words had weakened. Adrian's eyes never wavered. "I don't need to shout," he said quietly, yet with lethal precision. "I don't need to raise my voice. You have already proven yourselves unfit for the responsibilities entrusted to you. Effective immediately, you are terminated from all positions within Carter Aviation. Security will escort you from this premises. You will have 20 minutes to collect your belongings under supervision. You will not set foot in any Carter Aviation facility again." The rain seemed to intensify, each drop punctuating the verdict. Monica gasped audibly, her hands trembling as tears welled in her eyes. Victor dropped his gaze, the reality of his downfall pressing down like a weight too heavy to lift. Cassandra's lips curled in a grimace of disbelief and rage. Her whispered lies, her delay, her complicity all rendered meaningless by the calm authority of the man they tried to humiliate. Layla Ortiz and Darius Cole felt a surge of relief and inspiration. Their earlier hesitation, their fear of standing up, had been met with an example of courage that transformed the moment. Miles Carter lowered his camera, knowing the footage he captured would now serve as the key evidence in solidifying accountability. Adrian's gaze softened as he turned to Layla and Darius. "You saw what was right and what was wrong. You chose to stay silent before. Today, I ask you to act, to be the voices that prevent further injustice. Layla, effective immediately. You are promoted to Customer Service Manager. Darius, your courage in acknowledging your hesitation and standing with integrity earns you the role of Regional Director." Their expressions reflected a mix of shock, gratitude, and resolve. Victor's Monica and Cassandra were escorted toward the Falcon 8X, the storm beating down upon them as if nature itself marked their disgrace. The juxtaposition of their humiliation and the rising morale of those aligned with justice was stark. Adrian's calm authority had transformed the storm from humiliation into a catalyst for reform, a living testament to integrity prevailing over prejudice. The tarmac, now alive with tension, rain, and the presence of both authority and accountability, had become a stage for transformation. Miles Carter's recording captured every nuance, ensuring that this moment, the first public reckoning of Adrian Bennett's leadership and the consequences of bias, would not fade with the storm. Adrian raised his hands slightly toward the Falcon 8X, signaling his team to prepare for the next phase. The first act of reckoning had concluded. The storm of accountability had begun, and Carter Aviation was poised to enter a new era, one defined not by fear or prejudice, but by integrity, courage, and unwavering dignity. The rain had begun to lighten, though the tarmac remained wet and reflective, mirroring the storm of events that had just unfolded. Adrian Bennett stood at the head of the Falcon 8X stairs, his soaked suit clinging to his frame, but his composure unshaken. Around him, the echoes of footsteps and the soft hum of engines punctuated the heavy silence. The storm had passed, but the weight of what had just occurred resonated deeply in every soul present. Layla Ortiz and Darius Cole, newly promoted and emboldened by Adrian's decisive action, stepped forward beside him. "This is just the beginning," Adrian said, his voice calm but resolute, carrying over the still drizzling tarmac. "We cannot allow injustice, bias, or silence to define Carter Aviation. What happened here is unacceptable, not just for me, but for every employee, every passenger, every individual who has ever felt marginalized within this company." Miles Carter adjusted his camera to capture the moment. Every eye on the tarmac reflected a mixture of awe, respect, and cautious anticipation. The storm outside seemed now like a metaphor for what Adrian was about to initiate: a cleansing, a reset, a transformation. He spoke slowly, deliberately, ensuring that every word would resonate not just in the moment, but in the memory of everyone present. Adrian turned to Sierra Bennett, his COO, whose presence reinforced the authority and support he now wielded. "Sierra, coordinate with HR, security, and legal. Initiate the immediate rollout of our anti-bias training program. Make it mandatory for every employee from ground crew to executives. Implement an anonymous reporting hotline, so no one fears retaliation for speaking truth. Ensure we deploy the Equity Guard AI system across all internal communications to identify and prevent discriminatory language or actions." Sierra nodded, her voice firm and efficient. "Understood. Everything will be implemented within the week. Training modules, reporting systems, and AI monitoring will all be live and fully operational." Adrian's gaze swept over the ground crew, attendants, and executives still lingering nearby. "Layla, Darius, Miles, you were witnesses today. Your courage in speaking out, in standing with integrity, is the model we will now share company-wide. You will assist in mentoring and guiding employees as we roll out these initiatives. Change cannot be dictated. It must be exemplified. Layla's eyes glistened with emotion. I will do my best, sir, she said, her voice shaking slightly from both the cold and the weight of responsibility. Darius exhaled, the tension in his shoulders easing, a mix of relief and determination filling him. I will not allow fear to silence me again, he said. Victor Langston, Monica Fields, and Cassandra Reed were escorted nearby under supervision. Each step they took reflected the gravity of accountability, their humiliation amplified by the silent authority of Adrian and the observing team. The storm had ended, yet their disgrace remained a stark visual against the glistening tarmac. Adrian's attention then turned inward, reflecting on the series of events that had led to this moment. Memories of past prejudice and humiliation resurfaced not as sources of anger, but as fuel for systemic change. He remembered the times he had been underestimated, dismissed, or marginalized due to the color of his skin. Those experiences had forged resilience and a quiet strategic strength that now allowed him to convert personal adversity into collective progress. Layla and Darius, observing Adrian, felt a renewed sense of purpose. They understood that leadership was not merely about authority or position, but about courage, integrity, and the ability to transform difficult moments into platforms for progress. The storm that had soaked them in rain became symbolic of the cleansing and renewal that Adrian intended for the company. Miles Carter, camera in hand, captured Adrian's subtle gestures, the glances exchanged between employees, and the unspoken acknowledgement that a new era had begun. The footage, once merely documentation, now carried a narrative of empowerment and hope. Every frame testified to the power of integrity and decisive leadership in confronting systemic bias. Adrian stepped closer to the Falcon 8X, the sleek fuselage reflecting the waning storm. Today, we have witnessed the consequences of bias, fear, and inaction, he said, voice steady and resonant. But we have also witnessed courage, integrity, and the potential for transformation. Carter Aviation will not merely recover from this incident. We will thrive because of it. We will set a standard for the industry, for our employees, and for our communities. Layla Ortiz's chest swelled with pride as she listened. For the first time, she felt that her actions, her courage, and her willingness to align with what was right could tangibly contribute to a meaningful shift. Darius Cole, similarly, recognized the profound lesson that silence in the face of injustice carried a cost. While speaking up could catalyze change that extended far beyond the individual. Adrian paused, letting the words settle. The storm had cleared, yet the tarmac shimmered, mirroring the tension that remained as a reminder of accountability. We will measure success not just in revenue or operational metrics, he continued. We will measure it in trust, transparency, and equity. Every employee will have a voice, every action will be accountable, and every decision will reflect our commitment to justice and dignity. Victor, Monica, and Cassandra, standing nearby under supervision, could hear the words. The impact was palpable. Their actions had been exposed, their positions terminated, and the ripple effects of their misjudgments would reverberate throughout the organization. Yet Adrian spoke not with vengeance, but with a vision and example of measured, principled leadership that demanded respect and catalyzed change. Miles Carter's camera panned over the scene, capturing the reactions of employees who had watched in silence, many previously unsure how to navigate moments of bias or injustice. Now, they saw a blueprint for courage and integrity, how one individual's steadfast commitment to dignity could ignite systemic reform. Adrian concluded with a final soft yet resonant statement, directing it at the gathered employees and the storm-reflective tarmac. Today, the storm has passed, but our work begins. We have the chance to redefine what it means to belong, to be respected, and to be empowered. Carter Aviation will not only survive this challenge, it will set the standard for equity, dignity, and accountability. Together, we will ensure that no voice is silenced by fear or prejudice ever again. The rain slowed to a drizzle, the wind easing, as if the world itself acknowledged the transformation. Layla, Darius, and Miles exchanged looks of affirmation, understanding that they had witnessed the first steps of a company reborn. The energy on the tarmac was palpable, a mixture of relief, determination, and hope. This was more than a recovery from humiliation. This was a movement toward justice, a beacon for every employee and every future leader within Carter Aviation. The morning after the storm, the headquarters of Carter Aviation buzzed with an energy that was new, tentative, yet undeniably electric. The memory of the tarmac confrontation and Adrian Bennett's decisive action still lingered in the hallways, in whispered conversations, and in the glances exchanged between employees. For many, it was the first time they had seen leadership wield power not just to command, but to protect dignity, enforce accountability, and inspire courage. Layla Ortiz arrived early, her footsteps echoing softly on the polished floors. She had spent the night replaying Adrian's words and the storm on the tarmac. "This is my chance to make a difference," she thought, her chest swelling with determination. Her promotion to customer service manager carried not just authority, but a responsibility she was eager to honor. She glanced at the digital display announcing the launch of the anti-bias training program, the anonymous hotline, and the Equity Guard AI system. Each initiative felt like a tangible step toward a future where employees' voices mattered. Darius Cole followed shortly, his usual composed demeanor punctuated by a quiet intensity. He had spent years hesitating, weighing the risks of speaking up against the safety of silence. The events of the previous day had shattered that comfort zone. His promotion to regional director wasn't merely a reward, it was a call to action. He moved through the halls, observing colleagues who had been passive, uncertain, or fearful, and felt a responsibility to model courage. Miles Carter, still carrying his camera discreetly, walked alongside them. The footage he had captured the day before had already been reviewed by Adrian and the executive team, and it was clear that the evidence would form the cornerstone of company-wide change. Miles felt a sense of pride and purpose. The device in his hand had transformed from a tool of self-preservation into a catalyst for justice. He glanced at Layla and Darius and nodded subtly, a silent acknowledgement of their shared journey. Meanwhile, Victor Langston, Monica Fields, and Cassandra Reed were nowhere to be seen within the operational areas. Their absence was a reminder, stark and visual, of the consequences that accompanied the failure to uphold integrity. Whispers of their termination spread quickly among employees, creating a ripple of reflection and cautious optimism. Some felt relief, others anxiety, yet all recognized that the company's culture had shifted irreversibly. Adrian Bennett moved through the office, rain-dampened suit now replaced with a crisp, dry ensemble, yet the calm authority he carried remained. Employees paused in their tasks, glancing at him with a mixture of reverence, curiosity, and cautious hope. He stopped briefly near a group of junior attendants, his eyes meeting theirs. "Yesterday was difficult," he said softly, voice carrying a warmth that contrasted with the intensity of his previous confrontation. "But it was necessary, and it is only the beginning." Layla Ortiz listened intently. the memory of standing on the tarmac in the rain still vivid. I won't let this moment go to waste, she thought, committing herself to ensuring the anti-bias initiatives were meaningful, visible, and effective. She began planning a series of small meetings with employees across departments, aiming to share stories, encourage dialogue, and embed the principles Adrian had championed. Darius Cole initiated a series of one-on-one conversations with staff members, particularly those who had been hesitant or fearful. His approach was measured, empathetic, and strategic. "You have a voice," he reminded them quietly, "and it matters. Courage is contagious. When we stand together, the company and our colleagues benefit." He could feel the subtle shifts in posture, in engagement, in willingness to speak up, as employees absorbed the message and began to internalize their own agency. Miles Carter continued documenting, capturing reactions that ranged from quiet relief to cautious optimism. He focused on moments of vulnerability, an attendant nervously sharing a past experience of being dismissed, a junior mechanic cautiously asking questions about the new protocols, a former middle manager reflecting aloud on moments they had chosen silence over action. Each frame told a story, a mosaic of human emotion shaped by accountability, leadership, and hope. Adrian convened a brief meeting with Sierra Bennett and the senior HR executives to review the first wave of implementation. "We need to ensure that the AI monitoring system does not merely identify bias," he said, voice firm yet encouraging. "It must inform coaching, prompt reflection, and drive constructive change. The hotline must be accessible, trusted, and free from fear of retaliation. Every employee must see that their voice has power." Sierra nodded, her expression resolute. "All systems are operational. We've ensured confidentiality, responsiveness, and transparency. The first training sessions begin this afternoon, and supervisors across departments have been briefed." She looked at Adrian, a slight smile of pride in her eyes. This is the moment when culture begins to shift. Adrian allowed himself a brief pause, reflecting on the journey that had led him here. He remembered the young boy in Chicago, the countless times he had been underestimated, dismissed, and excluded. Those experiences had forged the resilience, the patience, and the strategic foresight he now applied to transforming Carter Aviation. This wasn't just about punitive action or immediate reform. It was about embedding principles of equity and dignity into the fabric of the organization. Layla Ortiz led the first group of employees through an orientation on anti-bias practices. Her voice trembled slightly at first, but gained strength as she recounted the events on the tarmac, highlighting Adrian's approach: calm, deliberate, principled, and resolute. She shared her own reflections on fear and hesitation, modeling vulnerability and courage simultaneously. Employees listened intently, some nodding, some visibly moved, others taking notes with newfound commitment. Darius Cole facilitated discussions on decision-making and accountability. He encouraged employees to explore instances in their own work where implicit bias or silent complicity might have influenced outcomes. The atmosphere was charged, yet hopeful conversations were honest, reflective, and constructive. Staff began to see how individual actions, amplified across the organization, could shape a culture that valued justice, equity, and dignity. Miles Carter captured each session, knowing that these recordings would serve both as documentation and as inspirational material for broader internal communications. The transformation that had begun on the rain-soaked tarmac was now taking root inside the headquarters, visible in the faces, voices, and interactions of employees. By the end of the day, Adrian gathered the senior team for a brief debrief. Today was the first step, he said, voice calm but firm. We have seen courage emerge, hesitation confronted, and a commitment to change beginning to crystallize. Tomorrow, we continue. Next week, we expand. And in the months ahead, we embed these principles so deeply that bias, silence, and injustice find no shelter within Carter Aviation. Outside, the sky had cleared, sunlight glinting off the wet surfaces. It was a symbolic contrast to the storm from the previous day. Employees stepped out for a brief moment, feeling the warmth on their skin, reflecting on the emotional journey from fear to hope, from silence to voice, from complicity to empowerment. Words. The following week, Carter Aviation Headquarters had transformed into a hive of activity, energized yet deliberate. The anti-bias training programs were in full swing. The Equity Guard AI monitoring had begun its first sweep, and the anonymous hotline was active and available. Adrian Bennett walked through the corridors with measured steps, observing employees engaging with the programs and noting the subtle shifts in their demeanor. The storm on the tarmac was now a distant memory. The real challenge had become embedding systemic change across human behavior, culture, and habits. Layla Ortiz led the morning training session for a group of junior attendants. The room was a blend of nervous energy and cautious optimism. She shared the events from the tarmac, detailing the confrontation with Victor Langston, Monica Fields, and Cassandra Reed. Her voice, initially tentative, gained strength as she spoke about courage, integrity, and the power of standing up for what is right. We all make mistakes, she told the group, but choosing silence over action allows injustice to persist. Today, you have an opportunity to make a difference. Darius Cole facilitated a parallel session, focused on decision-making, accountability, and practical applications of the Equity Guard system. Employees were asked to identify potential biases in hypothetical scenarios, discuss the impact of inaction, and consider ways to foster inclusive behavior in their daily responsibilities. The atmosphere was tense, reflective, but charged with a newfound commitment. Some employees, initially hesitant to speak, found themselves opening up, sharing past experiences where fear or doubt had silenced them. Miles Carter, camera in hand, moved discreetly among the sessions, documenting interactions, expressions, and the gradual awakening of empathy and awareness. The footage captured subtle yet profound transformations, a young ramp worker nodding thoughtfully, a mid-level manager visibly moved by the discussion, a technician whispering a personal reflection to a peer. Every reaction contributed to the emerging narrative of cultural transformation, a story not only of accountability but also of human growth. Adrian convened a brief check-in with senior staff, including Sierra Bennett. The sessions are progressing. He said, voice calm but firm. The AI system is identifying patterns we hadn't fully anticipated. Some language, behaviors, and assumptions are deeply ingrained. This is exactly why our approach must combine technology, human mentorship, and open dialogue. We must address both conscious and unconscious bias simultaneously. Sierra nodded, reviewing the data on her tablet. The initial AI reports show patterns of preferential treatment, subtle microaggressions, and recurring instances of hesitation in decision-making. It's extensive, but actionable. We've already begun targeting coaching sessions and one-on-one interventions. Her eyes met Adrian's, conveying confidence in the structured implementation of reform. Layla and Darius observed employees grappling with self-reflection. One young attendant, visibly emotional, shared a story about being hesitant to challenge a senior crew member who had treated a passenger unfairly. The group listened, some nodding, others tearing up. Darius gently encouraged discussion, guiding employees to connect personal experiences to company-wide values. He emphasized that courage and accountability were not abstract ideals. They were daily choices. Miles Carter captured these moments, understanding that the footage would serve both as internal documentation and as inspirational material for future onboarding and training. Each frame conveyed a story of vulnerability, courage, and the potential for transformation. Adrian recognized that these moments, small yet profound, represented the most important aspect of change, the human element. Meanwhile, the terminated managers, Victor, Monica, and Cassandra, remained a distant cautionary tale. Their absence underscored the consequences of bias, silence, and misuse of authority. Employees began discussing the incident openly, reflecting on how fear of confrontation had previously allowed bias to persist. These discussions, once hushed, now formed a critical part of the cultural shift. Adrian walked into the cafeteria, observing employees in candid conversations. He overheard discussions about accountability, past experiences of exclusion, and personal reflections on bias. Some employees shared moments of discomfort or shame, but others expressed relief and hope. It feels different. One junior flight attendant whispered to a peer, "I actually feel like my voice matters here now." Adrian smiled slightly, recognizing that these conversations were the true indicators of progress. Layla Ortiz facilitated a session on empathy and perspective-taking. She guided employees through exercises that required imagining experiences from different viewpoints: passengers, colleagues, or subordinates. The exercise produced moments of insight, eye-opening reactions, and occasional tears. Some employees acknowledged past complacency. Others vowed to act differently moving forward. Layla reminded them that courage could be nurtured through small, consistent choices. Darius Cole led a reflective debrief at the end of the day, focusing on accountability and action planning. Employees listed actionable steps they could implement immediately, checking biases in decision-making, mentoring colleagues, advocating for fair treatment, and speaking up in moments of injustice. Each plan was specific, measurable, and tied directly to the company's broader equity objectives. Darius emphasized that these were not theoretical exercises, they were real, immediate, and necessary. Miles Carter recorded the debrief, capturing expressions of resolve and commitment. He noticed subtle shifts in employees' body language: shoulders lifted, eye contact firm, voices steady. The energy in the room suggested a profound cultural awakening. For the first time, the combination of leadership, documentation, technology, and mentorship was creating a visible, tangible transformation. Adrian convened a final meeting with Layla, Darius, Sierra, and Miles before leaving the headquarters. Today was the first full day of implementation, he said, calm yet resolute. We have observed moments of courage, reflection, and accountability. These are the beginnings of systemic change. Continue to guide, support, and challenge our employees. Celebrate small victories, address lapses promptly, and never allow fear or bias to dominate. Sierra nodded. The teams are receptive. The AI, mentoring, and training are aligned. Engagement is higher than anticipated. Layla and Darius exchanged glances, sharing a quiet moment of mutual understanding. They recognized that the journey would not be easy, yet the potential for meaningful, lasting transformation had never been more evident. Miles Carter captured the group as they walked through the corridor, a symbolic image of progress, leadership, and the human element at the center of organizational change. By evening, the headquarters had settled into a reflective calm. The storm of the previous week was a memory, but the storm of accountability, transformation, and hope had only begun. Employees left their shifts with a heightened awareness of their roles in shaping culture, their actions now imbued with purpose. The initiatives had sparked introspection, dialogue, and commitment. Carter Aviation was no longer just an airline. It was becoming a living example of dignity, equity, and accountability in action. Morning sunlight filtered through the expansive glass walls of Carter Aviation headquarters, glinting off polished floors still damp from the prior week's storm. The headquarters, once quiet and hierarchical, now hummed with a subtle electricity, conversations, reflections, and initiatives intersecting in ways previously unimaginable. Adrian Bennett moved through the main corridor, observing the subtle changes in posture, engagement, and demeanor of the employees around him. Courage, accountability, and hope had taken root. Layla Ortiz led a small team in a briefing room, going over real-time reports from the Equity Guard AI. The system had flagged several communications containing subtle language biases, microaggressions, and instances where assumptions could have impacted fairness in service. Layla's voice, firm yet compassionate, guided the team through understanding not just the what, but the why behind each flag. "This isn't about punishment," she explained. "It's about understanding, awareness, and growth. We are here to learn, correct, and lead by example." Darius Cole walked among employees in the operations area, observing interactions and listening attentively. He noticed a junior attendant hesitating before addressing a potential issue with a passenger seating preference, recalling past moments where fear or deference would have kept them silent. Darius approached with a gentle yet confident tone. "You're allowed to speak up," he said. "Your perspective is valued. Courage isn't about being fearless, it's about acting despite fear." The attendant exhaled, nodded, and proceeded to advocate for the passenger with newfound conviction. Miles Carter continued documenting, capturing both the behavioral adjustments and the emotional resonance within the teams. One mid-level mechanic, initially reserved, shared a story about previously witnessing preferential treatment based on subtle social cues and feeling powerless to intervene. The discussion, facilitated by Darius, prompted others to reflect and share their own experiences. Tears were shed, nods exchanged, and a shared sense of accountability began forming a network of courage spreading through the ranks. Adrian observed quietly from a distance, noting the patterns emerging. Employees who had been hesitant were now engaging thoughtfully. Previously overlooked individuals were contributing insights and solutions. The culture of silence and compliance was giving way to proactive participation. It was a moment that crystallized Adrian's strategic vision. Real change required both systemic tools and human courage, woven together to create accountability that was felt, understood, and enacted. Layla paused during the training to highlight the impact of personal experiences. "When we acknowledge the moments we've been silent, the times we've overlooked injustice, we reclaim our power," she said, her voice steady. "Today, you are rewriting what it means to belong here, what it means to be a responsible, courageous employee." Her words resonated deeply, inspiring visible determination in the group. Darius introduced a scenario exercise employees were asked to navigate a complex situation involving biased assumptions by a passenger toward another staff member. The group debated, collaborated, and experimented with solutions guided by principles of fairness, dignity, and transparency. The discussion illuminated blind spots, encouraged empathy, and cultivated practical strategies. Each resolution proposed demonstrated increasing confidence, ethical reasoning, and willingness to challenge norms. Meanwhile, Adrian convened a quick executive check-in with Sierra Bennett and the senior HR team. "Reports indicate substantial engagement," he said, voice calm but authoritative. "We are seeing early evidence that training, mentorship, and AI monitoring are affecting behavior. But this is only the beginning. Reinforcement, visibility, and consistent follow-through will solidify lasting change. Sierra nodded, scrolling through her tablet to review metrics and qualitative feedback. Outside the main operations area, Miles Carter recorded a quiet yet powerful moment. A group of attendants hesitated before deciding to address a microaggression witnessed earlier in the day. One spoke first, tentatively, but the others followed. Their collective action demonstrated the tangible effect of Adrian's leadership and the culture shift. Courage, once stifled by fear and hierarchy, had begun to cascade organically throughout the workforce. Victor Langston, Monica Fields, and Cassandra Reed remained absent. A visible absence that reminded employees of the consequences of bias and inaction. Their termination had set a precedent, but the ripple effect now depended on living examples. Layla, Darius, and Miles became these examples, guiding, mentoring, and modeling the behavior they hoped to instill. In the afternoon, Adrian addressed a company-wide virtual town hall, bringing together employees from all departments. His presence, calm yet commanding, filled the digital space. What began as an incident of bias, silence, and humiliation has become an opportunity. He began. We are transforming Carter Aviation from within. Each of you has the power to shape this culture. Your actions, your choices, your courage, they define who we are as a company and who we will become. Layla Ortiz shared a live reflection during the town hall, recounting the tarmac incident and her role in the first waves of reform. Darius Cole followed, discussing moments when fear had previously dictated inaction and how standing up had created tangible impact. Employees across departments tuned in, many visibly moved. Some whispered affirmations, others typed messages of commitment into the live chat, signaling engagement, empathy, and solidarity. Miles Carter's footage was seamlessly integrated into the presentation, highlighting candid moments of employee reflection, ethical choices, and collaborative problem-solving. The images were powerful employees hesitating, then acting, peers supporting each other, microaggressions confronted in real time. The combination of Adrian's leadership, human courage, and evidence-based accountability created an emotional crescendo that reverberated across the organization. By the end of the day, Carter Aviation had taken its first measurable steps toward cultural transformation. Employees walked through the halls with heightened awareness and a sense of shared responsibility. Conversations about equity, fairness, and integrity were no longer whispered. They were deliberate, visible, and encouraged. Courage had begun to circulate, modeled by Layla, Darius, and reinforced by Adrian's vision. Adrian reflected quietly in his office, watching the city skyline glint in the late afternoon sun. The storm on the tarmac was long gone, yet the emotional, cultural, and operational turbulence had yielded tangible change. Miles Carter's recordings documented not just compliance, but evolution moments of empathy, integrity, and collective courage that would define Carter Aviation in the months and years to come. The company had crossed a threshold. Bias had been challenged, silence disrupted, and accountability reinforced. The emotional impact on employees ranging from relief to empowerment was the clearest indicator that meaningful transformation was underway. Carter Aviation was no longer merely a business. It had become a living blueprint of integrity, courage, and systemic reform in action. The grand auditorium of Carter Aviation headquarters was bathed in warm, golden light, reflecting off polished floors and glass panels. Hundreds of employees, from mechanics in coveralls to executives in tailored suits, had gathered for the momentous occasion. Conversations quieted as Adrian Bennett stepped onto the stage. his presence commanding yet calm. The events of the past weeks, the confrontation on the tarmac, the firings, the training sessions, the AI monitoring, the courage and reflection of employees had all built to this defining moment. Layla Ortiz and Darius Cole stood near the front, faces a mixture of pride, anticipation, and humility. Miles Carter was stationed at the side, camera capturing the expressions and reactions of the crowd. Knowing this was more than documentation, it was the story of transformation. Sierra Bennett, Suo, waited off stage, ready to support the rollout of new initiatives announced by Adrian. The atmosphere was charged, electric, yet measured, a blend of relief and expectation. Adrian's voice resonated through the auditorium. We began with a storm literally and figuratively. Yesterday, we confronted injustice, bias, and silence. Today, we celebrate courage, integrity, and collective action. Carter Aviation will not merely recover from past mistakes. We will lead with dignity, equity, and accountability. His words, calm yet powerful, drew the attention of every employee present, their collective gaze fixed on the CEO who had turned humiliation into transformation. He gestured to the projection screens behind him, which displayed milestones from the last 2 weeks, the launch of the Equity Guard AI, the activation of the anonymous hotline, statistics from training sessions, and footage of employees practicing courage and integrity. These are not numbers, Adrian continued. These are moments of growth, awareness, and courage. They represent the change that begins when individuals choose action over silence. Layla Ortiz stepped forward, her voice trembling slightly with emotion. I remember standing on the tarmac, drenched and uncertain, watching injustice unfold. Today, I stand here empowered, not just because of promotion or recognition, but because I have seen the power of courage and integrity in action. Each of you has the potential to shape the culture of this company every day. The auditorium filled with murmurs of affirmation, employees nodding, some wiping tears from their eyes. Darius Cole added, "For years, many of us allowed fear to dictate our actions. Today, we reclaim that power. Speaking up, standing tall, advocating for fairness, these choices define who we are. Each decision, each action matters. Together, we are building a culture that values dignity, equity, and accountability over convenience, comfort, and complacency." His words were met with applause, growing louder as employees internalized their own roles in this transformation. Miles Carter's footage played across the screens candid moments of employees confronting bias, mentoring peers, reporting injustices, and embracing accountability. The images were powerful, evoking empathy and reflection. Adrian gestured toward the screens. This is what courage looks like. This is what integrity feels like. This is what we aspire to become as a company, as colleagues, and as individuals. The culmination of the day was Adrian's announcement of tangible reforms, systemic and enduring, effective immediately. He said every employee, from the entry-level attendant to senior management, will undergo mandatory anti-bias training annually. An anonymous hotline will remain open 24/7, ensuring safety and reporting. Equity Guard will continuously monitor our communications to prevent discriminatory language and actions. Leadership evaluations will now include equity and inclusion metrics. This is our promise, our standard, and our accountability. The crowd erupted in applause, some standing, some clapping slowly, absorbed in the gravity of the moment. The energy was contagious pride, hope, responsibility, and inspiration mingling in a palpable current. Layla, Darius, and Miles exchanged glances, recognizing that their efforts and the courage of countless employees had transformed both culture and consciousness. Adrian continued, voice steady but layered with gravitas. This is not merely a corporate initiative. It is a social imperative. Every interaction, every decision, every conversation contributes to a culture of respect, equity, and justice. We are accountable to one another, to our passengers, and to the communities we serve. Today, Carter Aviation is not just a company. It is a model, a movement, a blueprint for systemic change. He paused, letting the words sink in. The silence was heavy, but charged with anticipation. I was once a boy in Chicago, dismissed, underestimated, and told I did not belong. I have carried that memory through every stage of my career. Today, we transformed those experiences into empowerment for every employee here, so no one ever feels they do not belong, that their voice does not matter, or that courage is futile. Layla Ortiz took a deep breath and shared the story of the first employee who used the hotline to report subtle bias. The tale was raw, honest, and resonated deeply with everyone present. The anonymous report had sparked mentorship, reflection, and constructive interventions. The story illustrated how individual courage, guided by systems and leadership, could cascade into cultural transformation. Darius Cole added, "We are not perfect, and we will make mistakes. But courage, integrity, and reflection are ongoing practices. Each of us is responsible. Each of us has the power to influence the company, the industry, and beyond." The auditorium erupted once more in applause, the resonance of his words amplifying the emotional intensity of the moment. Adrian concluded with a vision for the future. Carter Aviation will continue to innovate, not just in aviation technology, but in the human experience equity, dignity, accountability. This is our legacy. It begins with the courage to confront bias, the resolve to enforce accountability, and the commitment to empower every voice. Today, we stand as a company reborn, a culture transformed, and a community inspired. Employees rose to their feet, clapping, cheering, and some openly moved to tears. The applause rolled through the auditorium, a wave of collective affirmation and solidarity. Miles Carter captured the moment, the faces, the expressions, the shared understanding that they were part of something extraordinary. Layla Ortiz and Darius Cole looked on with a mixture of humility and pride, recognizing the human impact of the transformation they were helping to cultivate. Adrian stepped back, taking in the scene, a quiet satisfaction settling over him. The storm had begun on a rain-soaked tarmac, had escalated through confrontation, and now reached a profound culmination. Culture, integrity, and courage interwoven into every corner of Carter Aviation. The journey was far from over, but the foundation had been laid. The employees had witnessed and internalized the power of dignity defended, courage chosen, and systemic change enacted. As the auditorium slowly emptied, conversations continued in clusters, laughter and reflection mingling. The sun dipped low on the horizon, casting long shadows and golden light across the headquarters. Adrian, Layla, Darius, Miles, and Sierra stood together briefly, exchanging quiet acknowledgments of the progress, the struggles, and the shared journey ahead. The transformation was underway, tangible and irreversible. Carter Aviation had become more than an airline. It had become a beacon of equity, courage, and dignity. The story of Adrian Bennett teaches us that dignity and courage are not measured by the absence of adversity, but by how we respond to it. When confronted with blatant bias, silence may seem easier, but true strength lies in measured action, integrity, and holding others accountable without losing composure. This story reminds us that leadership is not just about titles or authority. It's about responsibility, empathy, and empowering those around us to act with courage. It also emphasizes the ripple effect of accountability. One person's decision to confront injustice can inspire others, transforming a culture of fear into a culture of empowerment. The integration of systems, mentorship, and open dialogue ensures that fairness is embedded into everyday actions, not just lofty ideals. For older viewers and professionals, the lesson is clear. It is never too late to influence positive change, to stand for equity, and to mentor others in integrity. Every choice, no matter how small, contributes to building environments where dignity is defended and voices are amplified. Ultimately, this story encourages reflection. How will you respond when confronted with injustice? In your workplace or community, how will you ensure that courage and fairness define your legacy? Thank you for taking the time to watch this story. If it moved you or inspired reflection, please give this video a like, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe to our channel for more powerful stories of courage, dignity, and transformation.